All right. Thanks everyone for joining today, and thanks to all of our guests. Unfortunately, Armani had to drop out last minute, but we still got a really nice lineup today. We got Austin, who's head of strategy at Solana Foundation, David, who's a co-founder of Joke Race, an on-chain contest platform, and Andreas, CEO of Axis, which is a content monetization platform on Solana. Um, and I'll let you guys introduce yourselves, whenever, and I'll do a little spiel in the beginning here, but feel free throughout to jump in. We don't have like a set order of anything. But yeah, we got an exciting conversation today. I just want to encourage all the viewers, if you haven't, to check out our latest report on the evolution of consumer apps on blockchains. We put a lot of time and thought into this report that was commissioned by the Solana Foundation. We look at the rise of some of the, earliest consumer apps in crypto with DeFi, some of the problems with it, and how some of the newest consumer apps are sort of navigating this new world, new market today. So let's kick things off, I think. I think it makes sense to start off with DeFi. Personally, I've always had sort of a soft spot for DeFi. It was kind of the start of me throwing my whole life into crypto during DeFi summer. But it was this sort of like magical moment where like and I think for a lot of people, it was like, oh shit, like I can actually like use the blockchain for something. There's like all these apps I can play with. All I have to do is like connect my wallet. And I think we saw a rise of like all these apps that I think, really achieve some level of product market fit, for the first time by tokenizing value on chain. I think crypto users were able to do a lot more things that you basically couldn't do in the traditional financial system. With stable coins, you have USD on chain, you can send it anywhere in the world. You have lending markets that let you borrow and lend against crypto with, basically no middleman. Like even today, you can get a loan on like Aave or Camino faster than you can do so at a bank. Um, and so we had this explosion of all this stuff and synthetic assets and yield optimized and all this stuff. But it seems like in the past few years that, DeFi has kind of like faded out of the forefront and sort of fallen off the radar. So I guess my first question to everyone, you know, is like, why do you think that has happened? And is there a future for DeFi going forward in the space? Maybe we can just start off with Austin or something. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, DeFi, as you were saying, sort of has been historically the backbone of most of blockchain adoption and most of its product market fit in the early days. I think what we've seen over the last probably 2 or 3 years is that the initial like DeFi excitement was real and was palpable, and the idea that like for the first time since like, let's call it the 1850s or something like that, you could actually have an exchange of goods, in this case, digital commodities, where you actually owned both sides of the transaction with no middleman in the middle, and you have full property rights insured as part of those transactions. And that is like, you think about this sort of as like, oh, okay, cool. Well, we get that every day with like Venmo. It's like you really don't, right? There's no property rights enforcement in pretty much any other system except blockchain nowadays. And so when you look at DeFi and you're sort of like, oh, but like, I can just buy stocks on E-Trade or Robinhood. Like you're not actually buying stocks. You're buying proportional ownerships and rights of shares of things that other holding companies own. And there's 14 layers of settlement between you and the transaction. And for a certain type of person, that was like a life-changing experience because, they no longer have to think about these things as like, oh, I'm holding stock certificates in my drawer, right? I can hold digital assets on the blockchain. I can buy and sell these things. Yeah, stable coins are custodial, but other than that, like this is a pretty major disruption. And if you're listening from the United States or like Europe, or Singapore, like this may not make much sense to you. But if you live in South America, Africa, Eastern Europe, Russia, China, it's a very different type of proposition to say I actually own these assets and I can engage in financial transactions with other people, and we can have no counterparty risk, and we can have no risk of the state putting a capital control on my bank account. And so that core functionality of DeFi is still the backbone of so much of blockchain. The challenge is that core user base that really cares about that is not that big at the end of the day. This is sort of why if you look at like gold, right? There's a bunch of like bunker boys out there that love gold, and nothing wrong with gold, but like it's not what most people are going after in terms of an asset class. They fundamentally trust institutions, they fundamentally trust banks, and they want Tesla shares or Apple shares or something like that. And so as DeFi has gone more consumer, what we've seen is it has to break with some of those original founding principles and sort of start adopting things like real world assets, like tokenized equities, the BlackRock fund, Van Eck, all these sorts of different types of assets. And that process of getting the technology moved from something where it's deeply ideological to it's deeply practical, I think has gone slower than many people in the industry thought. The good news is it's like really quite honestly happening and is kind of here. And you go trade on something like Jupiter, or you go trade on Drift, or you go trade on any of these marketplaces on Solana or these DeFi applications, and you barely know you're trading on a decentralized venue. It's just as snappy as a centralized trading venue. Coinbase, I mean, UX is better than Coinbase or Binance or any of those guys, honestly, if we're being honest about it. And that's really impressive. And so is that like the real unlock of product market fit, though, that we really are going to take DeFi super mainstream? I'm not sure, because we still don't have the analogy of the savings account, really, right? We have a lot of things we've built up that are like you can build your own bank, but no one really wants to build their own bank. They want an integrated product experience where they can pay their rent. And like that for me is like the missing component of DeFi, is the ability to have USDC or USDT on chain and like mail your landlord a check, right? Or send something via ACH. I go like I think the place that DeFi has failed is actually not on chain. It's off chain, right? It's the off ramps are pretty bad. The on ramps are pretty bad. They're good from the perspective of I'm an investor and I want to buy a token. They're bad from the perspective of I'm a user and I want to pay a bill.
Yeah, completely agree. I also think you kind of touched on, is there product market fit there? And if you look at like just the users exchanges, Binance, 200 million users, like just massively dwarfs anyone that's interacting and using DeFi to date. And Kevin, I think you mentioned like just how quickly you can get a loan out on Aave. I don't think that we'll actually see what we consider to be product market fit that we see on stablecoins or a company like Binance, Coinbase, Backpack, until someone that isn't on chain is able to actually get a loan themselves within minutes and immediately on ramp and facilitate and use these products and services. And it's interesting, like my partner and I, for example, want to get a joint savings account. Me working in crypto, I'm like, why would we put money in a joint savings account when we can get yield on chain? First question is, how the hell do I do that? So there's a lot of products and services that I think need to be simplified and optimized on like on ramps and off ramps, to actually give them like real world utility. And it's great. Okay, you're getting yield on, your savings account 5% a year, much better than banks. But what am I going to do with that yield? And what happens when I do need to pay my bills? So I think that like all these companies are actually optimizing for downstream from them. It's just that the infrastructure isn't there yet, and the experiences aren't there yet either. But clearly, obviously, Binance with BSC, Coinbase with Base as well are like really optimizing because they see that that's where the users are going to flow and where actually the true value is going to exist later on down the line.
I think one issue we kind of have as a space is that, and I think Austin put it really well, like, you can build for on-chain or you can build for the much bigger market that is off-chain, but building on-chain use cases for on-chain native users is much, much easier. And it's not just much easier, it's also where the whales are. So, if you want to build for the masses, you now have to deal with actual real world infrastructure, real world integrations, onboarding challenges, reaching those users, and getting to scale with millions, billions of people. Whereas I think everyone could also just go after maybe 100 or 1,000 really, really rich people that can power stuff really easily. And so a lot of the space over the past few years, I think, has understandably kind of made this trade-off of saying, look, it's a lot easier for me to build for the whales than it is for the masses because I can do it fully natively on chain without having to worry about those other issues. But we're kind of at an endpoint for that, I think, right now. Like it feels like, we can chase this MEV, or like rabbit hole only so far before we're just building for 100 rich users. And that, ends up kind of foreclosing the possibility of what we're actually doing. And it's much easier to do that, and it's lucrative, and it's worked really well. But it's also been like an Ouroboros. It's like we're the tail eating itself, I think, over the past few years. And so, yeah, I just Andreas Austin, like really exciting to hear you phrase it this way, because I think like, yeah, the hard work is still ahead of us. Like I think back to 2017, and it's like in 2017 there were kind of two use cases that everyone talked about, and it was like prediction markets and supply chains. And we're finally seeing prediction markets play out like 7 years later, and supply chains nobody even wants to talk about because like any thought of like real world integration is just so challenging to even conceive of when you have all these whales that you can go after instead. But the fact that we're having this conversation, I think, means that things are changing, and that we have to go back to those kind of hard questions we had 7 years ago of being like, wait, this needs adoption.
I think there's also a dirty word that people don't want to acknowledge, like needs to become a reality if we want DeFi to be like actually truly mass market and outside of these thousand whales. And that dirty word is KYC. And we have the tech, we have ZK to actually like get on-chain KYC and like protect people's identity. But that is something that needs to be like overcome if we actually think like the general population of America is going to be taking out loans, maybe not on Aave, but some next gen DeFi platform. And how are they actually going to get that loan and then actually use it in the real world and get a house or something along those lines? So that's another hurdle that I think like that you just kind of alluded to is like, is the incentive there for people that are already in the space to build that out?
So I actually disagree with that. I don't think we need KYC for this sort of thing. I think okay, so to take a step back, on-chain lending is not very good. And I don't mean it's not good in the sense that the product isn't good. The product is exceptional. The rates are very bad, right? The borrow rates for USDC or USDT are extremely high. The borrow rates for digital assets, like true blockchain native assets, are a little bit better. But the reason the rates are high is you don't have billions of dollars getting 0.001% in a checking account, right? The traditional financial industry has this advantage over DeFi in that it is not transparent and is capricious and it has market capture. And so we are never like the idea that you're going to get a 30-year fixed rate mortgage on chain is ridiculous because a 30-year fixed rate mortgage is not a financial product that makes any sense for any TradFi institution to offer. They only offer it because there's a government backstop on all of these mortgages and products, and they can hedge them with treasuries. You don't have that sort of infrastructure on blockchain, right? And when you don't have that type of infrastructure on blockchain, you're not going to get the good part of TradFi, and you're also not going to get the bad part of TradFi. So I think if what we're talking about is like, can someone get a predatory loan on chain, right? That could happen today, right? The issue with that is it's hard. The off ramps and on ramps make it difficult. Like if you want to go get a payday loan and pay 18% on it, and maybe you can get it on chain and pay 16%. That 2% savings is truly meaningful for someone who's low income and genuinely needs a payday loan. The problem is DeFi doesn't have repo men that are going to come and take your car if you don't pay it back, right? Like a lot of the existing financial infrastructure is truly built on either like monopoly pressure or like extortion or law enforcement as the final backstop. And
we need mafias.
Yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, right? Like the documents you sign that say if I don't pay back this loan, you can take my car and my house and my dog, right? Like that stuff is the monopoly of violence that a state has. And because this stuff is built a little bit ancillary to that, like I don't think the KYC is the problem. I think it's that these institutions, I mean, modern fintech apps had to deal with this too. Like Robinhood has bad debt, right? M1 has bad debt. Airbnb has bad debt. And these fintech companies, when they started, they had no idea how to deal with things like check fraud and, you know, credit cards that get declined and the charges that are disputed, like right after the Airbnb booking closes and all this stuff. And they had to build up all of this muscle and infrastructure. And that actually is part of why, you know, there's like whatever, 5,000 people who work at Airbnb. Why? It's a website. Like it's not actually that hard. Well, the compliance side is super hard. And the compliance side is not hard because of the laws. I mean, that is one part, but it's that they have to chase people down for money. They have to shake them down. There's identity fraud. There's all this other stuff. And so I think in some ways, like the KYC thing is correct, but like it's masking a bigger issue, which is that these systems are built to be able to establish trust, right? The trustless systems are trusted is sort of the weird flip we get in crypto. And everything that has to deal with retail onboarding to like traditional lending products, you are replacing trust with contract enforcement. And until there's an ability for a DAO to like hire a repo man or like take you to court, I think it's going to be really hard for us to mimic the traditional financial industry. And I don't think that's necessarily bad. Like I really like what Maker is approaching and like the Maker V2 architecture and Spark and all these sorts of things where they're going to create these like sub DAOs that can each generate yield and return that in. And so you can build new methods of collateralization and savings. And maybe that's the way in the long term, we actually start to replicate some of what's in the traditional financial space. But I think there's too much emphasis in the sort of like think class of DeFi builder, which is like a huge class of them, unfortunately, but focused on replicating the traditional financial industry as opposed to building things the traditional financial industry legitimately can't build.
I think there's also just a question of how much we want to go after America as you know, the market here. Like Cello, right? Like no one talks about Cello. Like we all think Cello is like, you know, some like public goods project that is like a third-rate chain or something that hasn't shipped anything. And then you look, and actually in Africa it has stablecoin adoption everywhere. It's like one of the top ones in the world, right? And they went after the market that actually needs it, that no one else wanted to go after, and they're killing it. And they're in amazing shape. So it's like, you know, but our bubble is very focused on America. And I think that can often be to our detriment that as builders, we're not actually in touch with the users globally. And it's like, that's more true in crypto than any other industry because it's so global. It's like, you know, previously, yeah, you might have been in Silicon Valley and building to middle America, but it was only a few thousand miles away. Now it's like, you know, there's a big divide that I think we have to work on bridging too.
But this is where we're seeing all these consumer applications that are not DeFi come up, right? And this is the thing I think is so interesting is like, there's this whole thing about like, oh, when are we going to get non-financialized products in crypto? And it's like, never, man. When are we going to get non-financialized products in the traditional space either, right? At the end of the day,
yeah.
I'm not sure why you'd want that, but also I think, you know, people are like, oh, Spotify is a music streaming company. Spotify is not a music streaming company. It's a fintech company. It's a giant money router that takes your $9.99 a month and distributes it out to hundreds of thousands of artists all around the world and a bunch of lawyers and a bunch of people who work for Spotify. But like fundamentally, like people think of these things as non-financial applications. And like in the early days of the internet, I guess we had that with like message boards. Maybe those were non-financial use cases of the internet, but those eventually become ad supported too. And so, yeah, like this is the thing that's so interesting is you start digging into this stuff and it's just DeFi all the way down because it's just markets all the way down. But we can, but like, I think the difference there is like financialized applications for entertainment versus for like investing and making money. And that's one of the big transitions we've seen over the last 2 years in consumer focused applications, whether it's paying for content subscriptions, or whether it is, you know, NFTs and like stuff like Drip House. These are like very different types of uses of blockchain, or whether it's, you know, frames and Farcaster or blinks on Solana and actions. To me, that's like a cool new way to sort of get around the problem of DeFi. People expect it to make money, as opposed to, you know, entertainment. You don't expect to buy tickets to a baseball game and get more money when you leave the stadium than when you walked in.
Yeah. Go, Andreas.
Yeah, I was gonna say everything is financialized. It's just how prominent and pressing it is within the application. And like you mentioned, Drip, perfect example. And I think Vibu mentioned basically his goal originally was to get these NFTs in the hands of people for free and have them realize like what the idea of actually ownership is, allow them to sell it on a secondary market. They might make 1 cent off of it, but that doesn't matter. It matters that they realize that I actually truly own this and was able to sell it to someone else, and now I no longer own it. And that is like the prevalence of like financialization that can go to an app that is mainstreamed and not at its core a financial application, but inherently when you like add ownership in any application, it will be financialized. But that's like obviously part of the reason why Drip is doing so well and why it's so successful. So yeah, I think it's a double-edged sword in the industry, but it can definitely be used to your advantage as like an app builder within the ecosystem.
Yeah, I mean, this is something I grapple with every day, which is just like what we're building could not have been done in Web2 Rails. And it's not just the fact that like, oh, we're financialized. It's like we're financialized in a way that you could not have financialized a Web2 product because of the blockchain. Like the promise here is programmable money, right? So like to go back to Austin's example of like Spotify, it's like, okay, well, if this is built in a blockchain, you could probably get rid of a lot of middlemen who are signing contracts and trying to figure out like how to distribute it and managing the bank account and like, et cetera, right? You could just save a lot of money. And there's that piece. And I think like for what we do with contests, it's like the fact that you can have programmable rewards that go to winners is like, that's verifiable, that can automatically be done, that's programmatic. Like that just removes a lot of intermediation and builds a lot of trust. But when you go to the next level, you can start to do things that never could have been done before, right? And I think like to take us an example, it's like, you know, users are entering contests, voting, they're paying for this. And then we split the fees. And so it's like a contest creator could keep that money, and that's cool. Now they can monetize in a way that they never could have done. Because in Web 2, like if you wanted every single tap to be an on-chain act, to be like a financial action, you would have to like double tap Apple Pay on your credit card for like 10 cents microtransactions. So that seems small and insignificant, but it's like the fact that you can tap and transact at any moment is like, that's a huge UX breakthrough, right? To not have to like charge every single time to your credit card. But then you take the fact that like now, because it's fully programmable, like you could keep that money or it could go back into the rewards pool, and you can have self-funding contests. So you can have contests that have huge rewards that you don't put any money up for, right? Or you could have that go to a smart contract that buys a token. So every time somebody's voting, they're actually buying your token. The token price is going up. You're distributing it to users. They have an incentive to participate. And like you can have meme coin contests where the token's going up. It's like all this just programmable money. But it's like that is not something that ever could have happened before. Like you know, the like my mind is just constantly blown just seeing the possibilities of like what can be done when you have programmable money. And it's huge. Like disintermediation is the first step, better UX is the second step. But then the fact that you can start having self-funding mechanisms, like it's just it's actually the financialization of it is incredible and what can be done socially.
I mean, I went through your Twitter a little bit before this, and I was just taking a look. Yeah, good stuff. But yeah, I mean, when you have open source like programmable money, I'm pretty sure a bunch of the use cases that you imagined when you first launched have already been ripped through, and you're finding like a limitless amount of use cases that you never even imagined. And that's like the glory of all of that is there's so many different applications and use cases across the world. There is no limit, and that's what's so exciting. But it actually blends into what your comment was earlier on and not considering other market participants and their use cases and how they vary across the world. And that's kind of the issue of a closed economic ecosystem. We don't think about how people on-ramp money or use money in the US versus how they do it in Africa. And in your exact use case, people are basically using your platform for things that are self-purposeful for them, but beneficial for other participants as well. And that's the beauty of it.
It's pretty crazy when you become like sort of crypto pilled. You start to like see everything in the world as like, oh, this is like something that can sort of be improved by like, you know, maybe not every single use case, but like you insert the blockchain in there and you insert programmable money in there, then you kind of think about how a lot of things can just kind of be flipped on their head. And to me, it feels like, you know, in the beginning with like DeFi and everything, we're sort of barreling towards this, like, you know, we're going to fix everything. We're going to replace all the inefficiencies in the system. And And then I think somewhere along the way, it kind of sort of got lost and things became even more complicated. And then we're not really addressing like real users anymore again. And we're starting to like cater towards like people who can like, you know, they got smart contract bots and they're optimizing for their trading on chain and all this stuff. But yeah, so I guess I want to turn a little bit towards like I guess what you guys were touching on a little bit is um like this like social experience and like integration with Web 2. I think before it seemed like Web 3 was kind of trying to carve out like a completely separate world of like Web 3. But now it seems to me like there's a lot more, you know, effort in integrating a lot of the, you know, infrastructure and sort of like experiences and UX that already exist in Web 2. And it seems like, you know, maybe there's some things that like apps and like the like app store experience and all that that has already been sort of figured out, and then that people are used to. And so kind of wondering what you guys think about the way forward. Like, are people going to just start building like super apps with really nice UX? And is like what's the integration sort of look like with Web 2?
I mean,
It's kind of difficult.
sorry, go for it.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult. I mean, when we started Access, it was like kind of early on. It was, do we go the mobile app route or are we going with a web app? And I think a lot of founders, especially in crypto now, need to make that decision, which massively impacts like how your business and product works. First and foremost, we went with like a web application naturally, because there are incumbents like Apple, Google, all of that stuff. And we can talk about the Solana saga as well, which is a side piece to that. But it's basically like, how much flexibility do you want, both in the present and in the future? And at the end of the day, for like an application like ours, where it's both like a centralized front end, but a headless marketplace in the sense that it's a permissionless protocol that can be integrated anywhere. To operate like a mobile application in that environment is really difficult, and also having like composability with other applications that integrate your product and service as well. So there really is like a fine line that you have to pull, and not having it an app is also like a mobile app is a massive disadvantage in many cases in terms of just distribution. So yeah, there's just so many different trade-offs that you have to really consider when you are starting off on your product. But I am team web app, at least for now, until we kind of figure out better infrastructure and also solve for like the issue of like that 30% kind of mafia fee on the Apple Store. But there have been like some pretty interesting applications that have done a pretty good job on it. Honeyland, for example, if you guys know them, it's just like pretty much a standard mobile game, but they do in-store application purchases, and there are tokens involved in that. But they figured out a way to bundle in like novel in-game items that comprise 30% of the purchase fee. So there are creative ways to do that, and I think they've done a great job at making like a seamless experience where like people's parents, I know, use that application and they have no idea that it's crypto. So it really just depends on which route you want to go, and the considerations that you're going to take into effect for the long run.
I kind of take something I've been thinking about a lot recently, actually, is like I think there's kind of two audiences. I was kind of saying this before, I guess, with the whales and the mass adoption, but I think like there's an audience of people who are very crypto native, who look, there's still a lot of room for any app to go after that in year 1 or year 2, year 3, to like really build. And then I think there's all the people who really just don't care about crypto. You know, it's like we think it's polarizing, but most people just genuinely, they're going to want to participate in an app. They don't really care if it's built on crypto or not. If it is, then it's going to let them do all sorts of things they couldn't do before. Polymarket is a great example of that. But like, you don't need to know that you're using crypto. All the Telegram apps are like that. Hopefully what we're building will be like that. What I don't think there is personally, and I think this is maybe contentious, I don't think there's an audience of crypto interested users who are just frustrated with the UX. Like, I don't think that there's a bunch of people who are like, oh, I would be really into crypto, but it's kind of complicated for me to use. I think they genuinely like, which is not to say we don't need to solve the UX issues. It's to say that like, I don't think there's an in-between path where we can like, make crypto easier to use. I think either they don't know they're using crypto or they are totally crypto native and they are going the craziest crypto shit that you can imagine. And like you do one or the other. And so like the goal for every app, I think, is actually like, unless you're building to that whale crypto native audience, you're doing something with MEV, like your goal should be that your users shouldn't have to even know that they're using crypto. Like they should just be able to like double tap Apple Pay, put $10 on the app. Every time they tap, it's deducted from there. And the fact that that never could have happened in any Web2 app won't even occur to them. Like the fact that that is something that can only happen in crypto, that you can actually put money into an app and then deduct it every time you tap, they won't even realize that that's going on. And so like building towards that, we're not there yet. I think it's probably still a year away from us. Embedded wallets are really kind of the big question here, as well as what I call like embedded funding, the ability just to do the double tap, and like add money through Apple Pay. Like these are big open kind of questions for the space, but like I do think there's a mass market out there if we can abstract away the fact that people are using crypto at all. Which doesn't mean that we should abstract away all the benefits of crypto we just talked about. It just means that for an end user, they should log on to an app and they can do all sorts of cool new shit that they didn't know about. I do agree that PWAs are the way to go right now. Avoiding the 30% app store fee, like that's kind of the promise of blockchains. And there's a little bit of trade-offs there, but it's totally worth it.
Yeah, it's interesting. The distribution model is always one that I guess one of the things I've been thinking a lot about is how bad the UX of a mortgage is, and like how bad the UX of
So
like
bad.
any government services, and yet people obviously still do them. And so there's this thing where a lot of people have been saying for years the crypto UX needs to improve, and I think that's a true, accurate statement. But at the same time, the products can just get more compelling too. And this is what we see in like developing countries, right? Like everyone in El Salvador, everyone in Venezuela, everyone in Argentina, everyone in Turkey uses crypto. They don't care about the UX. They care about the fact that their national currency is an 88% inflation rate, right? And so like there's sort of two ways to push crypto adoption into more people. One is you make the UX better and you start to sort of mirror the way Web2 experiences go, like you're talking about with PWAs and what Honeyland and those guys have done. And the other way is you just make the products more compelling. And I think these are sort of like type 1 and type 2 problems, right? Like one of those problems is a refinement problem and the other one is an opportunity problem. And I find the opportunity problems much more exciting, but I'm very glad there are people working on the refinement problems too.
Yeah, 100%. Unless you're providing and creating an application that is either one, novel and something brand new to the marketplace, or just a massive improvement to existing products and services that are already out there, it's going to be hard to like actually get users. So at the end of the day, it's like just build something people want and then figure out part of it, UX, down the road. But I will say, like, UX is better than obviously it's ever been at any single point in this space. I think that a lot of people are just incredibly impatient and also don't realize that like this space has not been around for long at all. And I think it's like, what is it? The time between the first email ever sent and when Hotmail was created is something like 15 years or something, which is just like ridiculous and double the time that a lot of these platforms have even been around in crypto. So I think it's focus on the value that your platform will deliver. Think about what your platform will look like in the future. Should all of your wish lists of UX improvements be achievable in the future? And if you do that, then you'll be in the right place to accomplish whatever it is you want to do, when inevitably some sort of middleware provider or service provider will create a solution that solves the problems that you have. So yeah, it's just build stuff people want that are either novel or better than what already exists.
Hey, I really liked Austin's breakdown of these two kind of categories. And I think like for stuff that people really need, they will deal with UXL, right? Like if they are going to lose their home and there's a hope for them not to, and like, then they will deal with UXL. And we saw that in a kind of dark way with some of the play to earn stuff last cycle. But like there is also a market for things that people don't know they need and want. And I would say actually most Web 2 big products you can think of fill that category. Like Twitter is not something that anyone like thought they needed. No one in 2007 was like, I need 140 characters, right? But like once you create it, people are, you know, it becomes an integral part of their life every day, and it's their social network, and it's really important. And so for stuff like that's where I agree with Austin. I think it's like a type 2, but like it actually it's a gigantic market to be able to say like, hey, if you want to participate in an app, like you can log onto the app and use it, rather than say, hey, if you want to use this app, you actually have to go create an account on Coinbase. You have to fund that from your bank account. Then you have to wait 7 days. Then you need this thing called like MetaMask, and you know, or like a third-party wallet, like a Phantom. Then you're gonna like fund it by going in Coinbase and then sending out the money to that account. And then once you have it there, 2 weeks later, now you're gonna be able to use our app. And like just that flow already, right, is like you can't get a Twitter off the ground, I think, if like that's the flow. You can get a mortgage company probably off the ground if that's the flow, because people really need that. So
We
I
sort of have that
appreciate
already,
Yeah.
which is cool. Like Figure Markets is like a private capital HELOC
Yeah.
marketplace. They're built on a private blockchain, so it's a little bit different. But like that's the stuff I think is sorry to interrupt you. That's stuff I think is so interesting that like people are actually building this stuff, but like there's so much. Like if you talk to the guys who have like been building Figure and Provenance, which is one of the most, it is by far the best built out enterprise blockchain product anyone has showed me. Um, they had to do all these like games and tricks to get like the banks and the traditional people on board. And the games and tricks they had was they had access to billions of dollars of HELOC that people wanted to
This
provide
helps.
loans for, right? And it's like that's not a cold, like that's not a problem, that like that's a cold start problem, right? Like that took someone who was in the industry saying, I've been in the industry for 30 years, I'm gonna like stake my career on this new and disruptive idea. I think we need more of that. Like I don't know how we get that. We need like more old founders, maybe. That would be an interesting one.
Pineapple's another one, if you know them. They're not like in market like Figure is, but still same problem trying to solve, and love what they're trying to do. But yeah, I think that's a lot of it though, right? Is like, all right, how do you get the underwriters? I think that like if you can get the consumer demand, you'll always be able to get whoever it is on the other side to come basically complete your product, service, whatever it is that you're building.
I think one of the, or I think the two things, two apps that we really got to talk about are Polymarket and Pump.Fun actually. So it seems like these two apps kind of sort of came out of nowhere. Well, you know, Polymarket's been around for a long time, but Pump.Fun is like seems to be like this new meta, this new thing that um is really sort of tapping into this like meme coin and Polymarket's it's a prediction market, but sort of gambling at the same time. Um, why have these apps gotten so popular this year? Like, and why has like no one built them before? Like, are these even legal? Like, what is going on? Yeah, like what do you guys think?
So why has no one built them before is I love these questions because there's like two answers. Like one is like, oh, there's all these technological reasons. The other is just like no one thought of it, right? Which is like, or no one did it, right? This is like there's this real entrepreneurship bias that happens where people are like, oh, if this was a good idea, someone would have done it already. And like the number of people who tell me that, I'm like, no, they probably just haven't done it, and you should do it. Like the classic thing of like how ideas are completely worthless and execution is the only thing worth anything, outside of like a few things, right? But like for the most part, what we're talking about, the things that make stuff valuable is getting it done. um Everyone was talking about betting markets on chain forever, and Polymarkets went and actually did that, and you know, props to them. And you know, Pump.Fun is interesting because they actually started on base, and what their whole thing was like, oh, blockchain's finally cheap enough that we can build this, and you know, we think Ethereum users are going to be super degens. Turns out Solana users are super degens, and like Pump.Fun found its product market fit when they expanded to Solana. And that's like a very interesting story there too, I think, about like the differences in user base. But like Pump.Fun would not have been successful without the network effect of Solana. I think Polymarkets is one of those rare products that was successful in spite of being on Polygon, not because of being on Polygon. That's actually like the biggest critique you hear of Polymarkets is that the base layer it operates on is not decentralized. And so, there's all those sort of questions around something like that, but they've done an incredible job building out that product. And it clearly has one of the strongest product market fits in crypto, along with Pump.Fun right now.
I think there's two common threads between them, and agree with everything you said. And that is the social element of those platforms. The social element of them is very different, but it's still an important component. So like the social element of Polymarket is we take a look at it and use it to interpret our thoughts about a specific event and communicate with each other about that. And then obviously on Pump.Fun, it's just all of the ridiculous social elements and meme creation of like real news in real time. And I think that that's like a super important element about what makes these apps so like successful, and just like the craze that's been built around them. Well, an interesting one that I actually saw a tweet that I responded to is Tim Copeland from the block as well. And he was actually kind of mentioning how like just interest in news in general had kind of dissipated versus, and it has been on a downward decline for quite some time. And mentioned that people would just rather like trade or launch meme coins. And I think one of the key points that he was missing was that in many ways the meme coins are the news, and they are the social element of what's going on. And they are this kind of like social cohesion of people that are just kind of coordinating around each other around a live stream or a specific event. So yeah, I think like the more that the internet exists and crypto exists, the social element is going to become more and more important. And ultimately it's what like ties everyone together, and why we're all able to stay online all day and kind of keep our sanity, at least relatively, about us. So yeah, I think just like more and more social applications, or applications that incorporate social in them, is going to be just like a key staple in any like new product. And it doesn't have to be, oh, this is a social media platform, but just the interaction of users between each other is incredibly important.
Yeah, I think that's the key point. Like, I published this piece called Social App Thesis, saying that every single DeFi app has to be social because you have to get people to your front end to actually get fees. Otherwise, you see what's happening with Uniswap, where it's like its competitors are using its own protocol against it to take users away, which is one of those incredible things that can only happen in a blockchain. So like being social, like all else aside, it builds traction, but it also like it's what protects your front end and your moat. And Alan from Pump.Fun DM me. It was like, don't give away the secret. But like, yeah, it's it. I think like one way I kind of think about it is like blockchains are kind of good for two things that seem very different. And one is social consensus, like any sort of decentralized process for people to come together and like coordinate around things they care about, right? And validate. Like blockchain at its core does that. It gets people saying this is real, we believe in that, this is legitimate. And so like that's kind of the side of crypto that's very like public goods oriented, coordination, like utopian. And the other thing crypto is really good at speculation, right? It's just like degen gambling, like bet on something. And like what's really interesting is like what happens if you try to combine these two things together? Like what happens if you can get social consensus plus speculation in one piece? And I think it's like on the surface, yeah, like Polymarket and like Pump.Fun are very opposite. Like Polymarket's focused on the real world, and Pump.Fun is very focused on like on-chain world. And like as Austin said, like Polymarket is really looking towards like outside users who are non-crypto, and then like Pump.Fun has done a really good job of finding the most degen like crypto users on Solana, right? But like they both combine social consensus with speculation. Like both of them are about saying, let's find things that people are tribal about and they care about and they want to pump the value because socially it's important to them. And so that can be an election, or that can be, like sports events like on Polymarket, but it could also be like a meme coin, right? And so it's really about betting on community and like what happens when you get people to participate in tribal behaviors. And that's something I think about all the time with what we're doing. It's just like contests over and over again, like we see it. It's like they take off when there's a mix of both the financial incentive plus the tribalism. And if you have one or the other, the contest doesn't tend to do that well. Like you kind of need both to really pop off. And so like, yeah, I think that if you can find that intersection of social consensus plus speculation, like that's how you build a winning crypto product.
Yeah, I get all my news from Deck Screener now, by the way. It's crazy. I just look at the top trending coins, and I'm like, okay, this demure, what is this? And we'll look into some new like meme or whatever. But yeah, it's one thing I have trouble with, I guess, is kind of there's all this like talk about building community in crypto, and like, and obviously we know how important that is, and like the sort of power of like building a brand. But a lot of it starts to kind of seem like now everyone talks about it, and like how like, oh, that like this meme has such a great community and blah blah blah. And but it seems like, obviously a lot of it is still just like financially driven, and it seems like, especially now, um that's like a very seems like a very fleeting sort of community. And so what I kind of like grapple with now is like, how do like apps and brands in crypto, how are they going to build like a lasting brand and community going forward? Like what's the secret there? um and how do they keep themselves from just like fading away after a year, after everyone's like kind of bored of the same thing, you know?
Literally what I spend all my time thinking about, and I'm working on a post on this right now, but like the number of conversations I've had with chains in the past week alone, where they're like, oh, actually going after airdrop farmers and like mass TVL to try to get like a centralized exchange listing isn't working well for us. Like we need real users. It's like it's kind of a crisis point, I think, for a lot of players in the industry right now. Like the communities they've built have just been there for financial incentives, so they're easy to acquire, but they're hard to retain because they will immediately go to the next, airdrop that they can get. And so like, yeah, the question of like, how do you build an actual community, right, of real people? I think it comes down to, and this is totally shilling myself here, but it's like, I think it comes down to actually being able to measure value of your contributors. So instead of just giving out points for anyone who has completed any rote action, like you actually giving out points to people who have been valuable to you. And that requires subjective decision making. That requires contests and people submitting and voting, and it's harder and it's more limited. But like the problem is there's no quality user base. Like there is no community of best devs in crypto. There's no community of best analysts in crypto. There's no community of best researchers, designers, artists. That doesn't exist. Like you would think like with the reputation systems that we have on chain, that would be really easy. You could use us to build those, but no one has been interested in building those because everyone has just wanted the scale of liquidity. And like that's made sense for like DeFi applications. Like liquidity really matters, and like just incentivizing as many people to deposit into your chain. I think like there was a point in history where that was a really good playbook to follow, not just for airdrop farmers, but for the actual success of your chain. But as we're like moving away from like everyone needing liquidity and that being the basis for power, like it is really important to have actual quality user bases. And so like there's a huge opportunity here for people to create these talent communities, because like you create that and you control that, like you can monetize that directly, but everyone's going to want to tap into that too. And it's hard work to do it, and no one wants to do it.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, like your community is only going to be around as long as you're delivering value. So you can capture people that will be like giving you vanity metrics, whatever have you. But like you said, like they aren't going to be around forever unless there's actually something for them to do and use. And at the end of the day, they're your customers, and it's no different than being a Web2 company. And what's the first thing that you do when you launch? You got to acquire 100 customers and adapt from there and build and iterate your product. So yeah, it's super important. And like, I think one of the best examples, and probably, I guess there's probably two like Harvard Business Review case studies of crypto communities that people should look at. And one is obviously Mad Lads and what they've done and how they've integrated that product and service and NFT community across all their products and services. And those people have become effectively just megaphones for their brand and their products, and for other brands and products as well. Another one that we're watching unfold in front of us is the Monad community. They're doing a great job, but at the end of the day, they need to deliver value once the chain launches, and they need to create products and services and foster an ecosystem of people that are well-intentioned, that are going to be good stewards for this community. I'm very confident that they'll execute on it, but it's an exciting one to watch, like kind of play out in front of us. So they've done everything perfectly up to this point, and it's going to be exciting for when they launch to see how that rolls out. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's just about like being sure that you're delivering value. It's not just vibes, because vibes can shift pretty quickly if you get pretty sick of not getting value or being treated properly by the product that you're there to use.
Yeah, the vibes are so dead right now. It's not good. But I guess
the tech has never been better. The UX has never
Mhm.
been better. The actual successes have never been better, and the vibes have never been worse.
I mean, I don't know where you guys are hanging out.
Yeah.
Vibes and Solana are pretty good.
Vibes and Solana are pretty good.
Yeah, they're fantastic. Exactly. But it's because of that product focus. And I think it's like the top-down approach. Yeah.
Because the vibes in Solana are good, the vibes everywhere else is bad.
No, I mean, like, I
Precisely.
think so. This is what's so interesting. Like the stuff that has like really strong. Okay, so the stuff that has really strong vibes right now is like things that are performing very well, like Solana, right? So I think like with Solana, um, the network and the core contributors have consistently shown that they're pushing the bounds of what's possible to build on blockchain, and there are downsides associated with that, right? There are like the network outages have mostly been solved at this point, but not completely. There was some congestion for a few weeks earlier this year that was like not great, right around the launch of OR and some of the Pump.Fun stuff. But fundamentally, those were solved in like a matter of a month, and the chain was not unusable during that period. It was less good to use than it should be. But at this point, we sort of have like earned this reputation of a network that when there are problems, they get solved and they get solved quickly. There's not like a just wait 3 years, we'll ship fraud proofs, I promise, like kind of thing that goes on with it. And, I think it's really hard to keep up the good vibes when the pace of innovation becomes very slow, because it feels like we were promised rocket ships and instead we got like Oracle, you know? And like that thing is just really hard. And this is where I think the vibes of something like Monad and Mega ETH and Solana, and even you see Sui coming up a little bit now too with their latest upgrade, where they've done like a lot of really good work under the hood to make it's only a 60 validator set, so like we'll see how it scales, but like they've done a really good job to improve like the user experience of transacting on it. And those are the places that have the good vibes right now, because they're not asking you to go through and make a series of compromises and to, go to a website that lists out all the pluses and minuses of using a specific flavor of the system you're trying to use. You can just go and enjoy the chains and build cool stuff on them and trade on them and enjoy that. And for a long time, that was only Solana. And it's really awesome to see. Like, genuinely, people are like, "Are you worried about Sui? Are you worried about Monad? Are you worried about Mega ETH?" And it's like, no, not at all. Like, for years, you could only build cool, fast stuff that needed 1,000 transactions per second on Solana, and now you're going to be able to build that in a ton of places. And so, what's the whole thing about enough monkeys on enough typewriters will type out the collective works of William Shakespeare? Well, like enough devs banging on enough fast chains, they're going to produce some killer applications that are really going to hit like mass adoption in a way that I think we all really hope the industry will. But like, you always go back to like Steve Jobs on stage in 2008 announcing the iPhone. Like, no one looked at that thing and said, this will change dating forever. But it did, right? And like that was only possible because you had a lot of devs hammering on the phone. And yes, you had beer drinking apps and an app called I Am Rich that just charged you $1,000 and showed you a button that said I'm rich, and like a bunch of, fart apps and stuff like that. And like we're still kind of in the fart app stage for consumer crypto. But like I think we're going to move very quickly into like the Tinder phase of it. And it's going to be very interesting to see the Uber phase of it, right? Like these are businesses that would not be possible without the smartphone. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in retrospect that'll look so obvious when we have more fast blockchains that right now is hard to imagine.
100%. And I just want to echo part of the element about the reliability of Solana and congestion specifically. And I think most importantly, during that phase, which looking back on it now was just like a blip in the radar, but like as someone that was using or building like a consumer application, like that sucked for a little bit. And we had to roll back some changes that we made in our application to optimize for users. But one of the probably the best things about that was even though it sucked for the time being, we all knew that it was just going to suck for a little bit and it was going to get fixed and it was going to be better. And making sure that you know that and that your ecosystem knows that and that they are able to know that they've made the right choice so that they can plan for 3, 5, 10 years. And that's something that I think is really missing in this space is people building products for 3, 5, 10 years and actually planning out that long. So knowing that this is just a blip in the radar, this isn't going to be forever, and that you are going to actually have that high performance that you're here for in the first place, and that is something that you're going to get while you are planning your application. So hats off to that, and how you are able to deal with that in the moment is like super important. And I think it put a lot of founders and companies and applications at ease, knowing that like this is just going to be a blip in the radar, and it was.
Yeah, I think Austin, you put into words like kind of my thoughts about like how people can like just build vibes and like stay interested in crypto. I think a lot of like you know the early like passion I got from crypto was just kind of like having this feeling that this is like the fastest place in the world where people are churning out like new applications and um, just pushing the technology as fast as possible, as far as possible. And I feel like sometimes I guess there was a point where it kind of felt like things were plateauing and we're kind of going different directions. But I think that kind of gives me a lot more excitement again about like, you know, just being able to like follow communities and follow like the chains and apps and the people that are like constantly building things, and like you can wake up and there's going to be a new thing for you to try on this. And I think that's like a very exciting future, you know, like and I think that's something probably that, you know, people can hold on to for a long time. And even though it's like, you know, it might be fleeting, but I think that like innovation and like being able to like follow along with it is like is sort of the secret sauce. But um yeah, I think we are getting to the end of our talk here. But this was a super fun discussion. um I want to let you guys, you know, say your closing thoughts on like, you know, whatever you're most excited about for the future, in the next couple years, and what people should look out for.
This isn't going to be super exciting because again, I've stated I think not too many people think on like long-term horizons, but I think within 5 years we'll have 3 applications, consumer-based applications on a high performance blockchain that have the distribution of what Binance or Coinbase has today. So hundreds of millions of users. 5 years from now, that's my guess, just based on what we're already seeing and like companies like Drip and other companies that are building out awesome mass consumer products.
Yeah, I think the stuff I was talking about before is really like we're going to see a bunch of cool new experimentations. A lot are not going to work. The thing I worry about most, I would say, in crypto is that the culture, like the mainstream culture, prevents people from building and experimenting in crypto. I think we've largely gotten past that, but there was a time when any of your friends who are remotely liberal just had a default horribly negative impression of crypto for no real good reason. But there's still a little bit of that too, right? That sort of like, oh, crypto's not real. It's sort of just these like bros like going to like parties and all this sort of thing. And you know, one of the things that Web 2 did very well is they wrapped themselves in this sort of blanket of respectability, even though under the hood, it's all just ad tech. And, you know, that was like that's a thing I think this industry could do a better job at in some regards. Like it's very, it feels like everyone sort of wants to pretend to be like Joe Rogan nowadays. And like like you can build a cult, but like building a cult is not the way that you change the world, right? Building a cult is how you build a cult. And that's kind of, I think, what I worry about most is that there's not enough willingness to expand and look at other perspectives and to take those criticisms seriously and sort of adjust and move forwards with it. Now, that doesn't mean, you know, cave on regulation. Like, God bless Coin Center. Everyone should go donate to Coin Center. But like at the end of the day, we have to make sure that what we're building is compelling on its own right, or we stray very quickly into arrogance. And the easiest way to kill the industry, I think, is to have a very arrogant approach to product development.
Yeah, I think this goes back to the point again about like it's much easier to build for crypto degens and whales, and that culture is very macho. I mean, Web 2 has become very macho these days, you know, and it's like this polarization and culture wars is like tech has very much taken the side of this like tough guy, you know, say whatever language we want to say. And it's like, meanwhile, actual culture is totally being driven by women. Like the biggest stars are women, their biggest fans are women, and 85% of consumer spending is women, which is just a stat that I cannot get over. Like women drive culture in every way whatsoever. And if we want this to be culturally relevant and we want it to be mass appealing, it doesn't matter what you think or what your politics are. You got to be working towards women. Like that is the base for social. And I think that's part of the reason a lot of these men are so aggravated and so angry is because they feel left out in a culture where women are really dominating culture. But like to go to Austin's point, like there's a lot of work to be done on the optics side to really get the users who actually matter, who are not the whales, unfortunately, in the long run, even if they have been in the short.
That's a tough pill to swallow on the woman front when you take a look at the Twitter analytics of people's follower base.
It's pretty bad. Everyone partner with Shifi and Boys Club. Like, come on. That should be a no-brainer.
Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining. This was super fun. You guys are all geek brains, and I feel like I learned a lot just from talking to you guys today. And yeah, we'll hopefully do this again sometime soon. Maybe the vibes will be better by then too. So
It's great on Solana.
man, it's still great. We're still going strong. Cool.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks, everyone.